supposed to save us. We thought we escaped the killers. We're one of who escaped with us. And now, there's no future left.
We fell through time to ancient ground, where giants walked where streets don't sound. The sky is red, the leaves strip black, and something's always watching back. Claws not teeth, the jaws of scale, but something colder right on trail. A mask of a breath, no words, no cry, just chasing, walking, and you die. Primal. No God, no rules, just cast the dirt. Primal. The jungle breathes and makes it hurt. No scream can reach the stars we knew. He's behind you now and coming through. Primal. Steel in silence, liquid rush. Primal. He's not alive, but he still hunts. The Rex can roar, the raptors scream, but Jason tears through every dream. He doesn't run, he doesn't bleed. You hear the crunch, you watch him feed. Behind in trees and caves at night, but still he walks, no need for sight. He waits while thunder splits the sky and strikes when stars are blinking dry.
He doesn't belong in this time, but this time belongs to him now. Not even the dinosaurs challenge him, because even they know what death is.
Nice there in ancient ray. He doesn't stop, he doesn't change. Lost behind, mask ahead, between the beast and him. You're dead, a scream is lost, the jungle cries. A friend impaled before your eyes. The BF Rex flees in the dark. Jason stayed to leave his mark. Primal. The blood drips on a Cretaceous stone. Primal. The past is screaming, but you're alone. A monster from the age of men, a stalking beast through time again. Primal. There's no escape, just pain and release. I'll cut the past into your face. He followed us through fire and time. He doesn't stop, he never speaks, but he always finds you.
Hey Slashaholics, before listening to today's chapter, please be sure to listen to the prologue first. I know it might be confusing that this says chapter 1, and some of you might have come to this late and think it's the first upload of the book, but there is a prologue narration that is available here on the channel, and this chapter is not going to make any sense unless you hear the prologue first. But without further ado, here is Friday the 13th Primal by me, Joshua LaRue. Chapter 1, The BF Rex. Edwin and Henry stood inside the sleeping quarters of the bird's nest structure in the Cretaceous. Edwin was dressed in combat boots with thick, tough cargo khaki pants, tucked into the ankles, and he wore a heavy, long-sleeved khaki button-up shirt, sunglasses, and a safari hat. A pair of binoculars hung from his neck. Edwin was definitely dressed for their excursion and looked fit and ready, but Henry, by comparison, looked skinny and small. The trust fund baby wore prescription glasses that turned into sunglasses in the sun. His clothing consisted of a retro t-shirt for an old rap group from years prior. Edwin could make out the lettering ICP and see most of a face painted in black and white clown makeup peeking out from underneath the khaki short-sleeve button-up shirt Henry wore over it, unbuttoned. He also had on khaki shorts and his own pair of combat boots, as well as a pair of binoculars. On his back, he carried a red leather backpack that looked nearly empty except for some basic survival gear and a couple of water bottles. Edwin had inspected it before the trip and made it clear they couldn't leave behind any trash or debris. Edwin had nearly laughed at the sight of Henry's pale, thin chicken legs. He'd already given him a quick rundown before stepping through the gateway. The two men had been watching many dinosaurs from the lookout for a while now. Henry had even almost lost his lunch observing a kill. However, now it was time to get to business. "So these are the important items you spoke of?" Henry asked, pointing to 2 cubes, 3 belts, and 5 small battery-sized objects sitting on a shelf inside the sleeping quarters of the bird's nest. "Ah, yes," Edwin said, picking up one of the cubes. "These are how we return to our time. This cube becomes a doorway when one of those power cells, the battery-sized objects, is inserted into the slot on top." "Ah, so I I assume these belts are the safety devices that render us invisible? Henry asked, eyeing the gear. Yes, indeed. When we leave here for our little field expedition, we'll be wearing them, Edwin replied. I can't wait to see a T-Rex up close, Henry said, sounding as giddy as a schoolchild, yet deep down felt trepidation. Today you're going to see 2, maybe even 6, if their eggs have hatched. They're the closest ones I've found so far. I haven't ventured extremely far out yet. There are other carnivores nearby, you've seen some of them already, but I can't guarantee your safety with those up close. However, there are plenty of herbivores beyond and leading up to the game trail and the Rexes. I promise you won't be disappointed, Mr. Wilkins, Edwin said. There was a slight edge in the way he said Mr. Wilkins, but Henry didn't think anything of it. Wow, just wow, Mr. Prism. This is unbelievable. Thank you for accepting my request, and yeah, of course, Henry beamed. And thank you for your generous admission payment. It'll go a long way toward further advancements in time travel tech, and call me Ed, Edwin said. You bet, I mean Ed. One quick question. Where's the restroom exactly? I need to go before we, go, Henry asked timidly. Ah, it's right through that door, Edwin said, pointing to a small door at the end of the room beyond a full-sized bed next to the shelf they'd been standing near. Thanks, Ed. Here, put this on when you're done. It clips easily at the front, and put this in your pocket, Edwin said, handing Henry one of the belts. He then reached for one of the power cells, seemed to reconsider, and chose the one next to it instead before handing it over. Edwin picked up another 2 power cells, slipped them into his own pockets, grabbing a return cube, and took an invisibility belt for himself. He clipped the belt on, demonstrating it for Henry, and then attached the return cube to a loop on his belt. I'll be waiting for you by the control panel, Edwin said, as he exited up a narrow staircase leading to the bird's nest observation area. He turned left towards the controls for the bird's nest that would take them back down to ground level. Henry followed Edwin's instructions, securing the belt around his waist and placing the power cell in his pocket. Then he stepped into the small restroom. But only moments after Edwin had left, and he felt the structure begin to lower to the ground, Henry emerged. He approached the shelf they had just stood in front of, quickly removed his backpack and unzipped it. After glancing over his shoulder to make sure he was still alone, he turned back to the shelf and gathered the remaining belt, cube, and the last 2 power cells. He tucked the 4 objects inside his backpack, zipped it shut, and slung it back onto his shoulders. Henry wasn't as timid or foolish as Edwin might think. He wasn't a trust fund baby, and his name wasn't even Henry Wilkins. It was Joshua Marcel, a researcher for Prism Tech's biggest rival, Nexus Technologies. He had agreed to go undercover and infiltrate Edwin's time gateway to retrieve samples of Prism's technology, something Nexus hoped to reverse engineer to unlock the secrets of time travel for themselves. Their backstory had worked. They'd created a background for Henry Wilkins that could survive even the most intense vetting, they thought, and all their efforts had finally paid off. Before Edwin and Henry returned to the bird's nest after their excursion, Henry planned to fake an emergency, something that would force Edwin to use the return gate clipped to his belt early. Then, when they returned to their time, he would make his way out of the building as fast as he could and get back to Nexus Technologies. It wouldn't be until the next time he ventured to the Cretaceous before Edwin realized the remaining cube belt and power cells were missing from that shelf. By then, Nexus would already be at work reverse engineering the tech, and taking the items may even end up leaving that douchebag Prism stranded in the Cretaceous with no way home. But that was of no consequence to Joshua. In fact, from what he'd heard about Prism and what he'd witnessed firsthand so far, gave him the feeling he might be doing the world a favor if that happened. Joshua, a.k.a. Henry, made his way up the stairs to meet Edwin and head to the Jeep parked near the structure. Their field trip was about to begin. The black electric-powered Jeep bounced over the uneven terrain. The Jeep was topless, and the bird's nest lay almost 2 miles behind them. Edwin was taking Henry to see the Rexes, and the game trail wasn't far now. "You're positive we'll be safe, Ed?" Henry asked, gripping the roll cage above the passenger door with a very tight grip, as if letting go would send him flying away into space. "As long as we stay downwind, which we will, definitely, then yes, Henry, we should be just fine," Edwin replied with a slight laugh, but the laugh didn't sit well with Henry. It didn't make him feel any safer. Earlier that day, the two men had spent over an hour on the observation deck of the bird's nest, watching distant herds of herbivores, flying reptiles, and more. They had observed the majestic dinosaurs through their individual pairs of high-powered binoculars, the towering titanosaurs by the vast lake, and smaller duck-billed hadrosaurs across from the long-necked giants, all taking turns drinking from the watering hole. Henry had watched in wonder as 3 huge flying creatures the size of a small plane flew over the herds of the herbivores in the distance. It wasn't all majestic, though. Henry had nearly turned away in disgust when Edwin pointed out the Deadeye King and his pack of raptors hunting a baby triceratops that had strayed too far behind its herd. Its mother, or what Edwin assumed was its mother, had tried to fend off the pack. But when she realized she was no match for them, she retreated to rejoin her herd, leaving the baby to a brutal demise. "We're not gonna let them eat the baby, are we? Don't you have some weapons?" Henry had pleaded, sickened by the scene. "It's nature, my dear Henry. Just beautiful nature. Survival of the fittest. Even if I had a way to stop them, I wouldn't dare interfere. It's not my place," Edwin had said, lowering his binoculars and turning to Henry. There was a devilish smile on his face, a sick glee that made Henry's skin crawl. "Now, watch what they do next. It's fascinating." "Oh, okay," Henry had said shakily. He didn't want to watch, but didn't want to arouse any suspicion. So he obeyed, lifting his binoculars just in time to see the raptors flip the young triceratops onto its back. The Deadeye King stepped forward, and with the flick of its deadly sickle claw, slashed open the baby's stomach from neck to groin. Blood and gore erupted from the incision as the pack tore into their kill like jackals. The raptors clawed and snapped at each other to jockey for position, some holding intestines and chunks of meat in their 3-clawed hands, tearing at the flesh with faces drenched in gore. It was too much. Henry dropped the binoculars, doubled over with his hands on his knees, pale, and struggling to hold down his recent meal. "Ha ha ha! Welcome to the Cretaceous, Henry, my boy," Edwin had chuckled, slapping the younger man on the back hard enough to nearly knock him over. "You sure you're up for seeing the T-Rex pair? You look a little green around the gills." Henry wasn't sure he wanted to get close to the Rexes anymore. Watching the raptors had terrified him. He kept picturing them tearing apart not a baby triceratops, but himself, Joshua Marcel, a.k.a. Henry Wilkins. When this was all just a plan for a bit of corporate espionage, the dinosaurs had seemed like distant pawns in the larger scheme of things. Now, though, they were real. They were flesh and blood. They were nearby, and they were deadly. But he reminded himself he just needed some of Edwin's tech. Had to steal it somehow. Then he could fake a medical emergency, forcing the early return before he could be found out, and before getting too close to anything that might see him as an entree. He'd just have to wait for the right moment. Besides, he'd talked so much about his fascination with the mighty T-Rex that acting scared now would be suspicious. He swallowed his nausea, bit back his fear and stood up, plastering an assertive expression on his face. "Yes, I'm fine, just got a little nauseous. The kill caught me off guard. I'm ready to go when you are," Henry had said confidently. "All right, if you're sure," Edwin had replied. "First things first. We need to head into the sleeping quarters and retrieve our protective gear and return cube." They walked down a narrow staircase into the sleeping quarters and stepped up to the shelf holding the belts, power cells, and return cubes. And the rest was history. That had only been about an hour and a half ago, but it felt like days now. Henry's heart was pounding, his nerves frayed. They'd been driving over rough terrain, but at least in the open, where he could see around him. Now they were on the game trail, surrounded by tall grass, lush fauna, and giant trees pressing in on both sides. The ride was so rough he feared being thrown from the jeep at any moment. Most troubling of all, the Deinonychus were still out there somewhere, and right now the two men were fully visible. The jeep's invisibility only worked when the special tarp was stretched over it, but it couldn't be on while driving. Activating their belts would be pointless inside a huge, fully visible vehicle. The few herbivores they'd seen had moved aside, but Henry doubted the raptors would be so courteous. Edwin had assured him that if anything dangerous came close, he'd activate a high-pitched frequency device in their belts, something that worked on the raptors. Henry wondered if it would affect the Rexes. More than the carnivorous monsters they were approaching, Henry also worried about being found out. What if Edwin asked for something from his backpack? Damn it, he thought. Why didn't I offer him a bottle of water before we left? I could have had it ready in my hands. His thoughts were cut short when the jeep came to a stop. Before Henry could say anything, Edwin put a finger to his lips in a shushing gesture. Henry's heart skipped a beat when he felt the jeep tremble slightly. "What's wrong?" Henry whispered. "Nothing. We're close. Gotta go on foot from here," Edwin whispered back. Edwin carefully exited the jeep, quietly shutting the door behind him. Henry followed suit. "Give me a hand," Edwin whispered, moving to the back of the jeep and pulling out the folded tarp. The two men spread it fully over the vehicle and secured it with stakes driven into the ground. Just like that, the jeep almost vanished from sight. Henry was impressed. Similar tarping was used in the military, but this was beyond anything he'd ever seen. He wished there had been a second one, something he could steal for Nexus Technologies to copy. "Follow me quietly," Edwin said, motioning Henry to follow. "Okay, should I turn on the belt?" Henry asked. Edwin shook his head. "Not yet." Prism led Henry into the tree line. The two men moved slowly through thick, lush vegetation and tangled vines. Edwin mused to himself at how Henry struggled to avoid thorns and bushes with his bare legs exposed. But Edwin knew exactly where to go. Suddenly, Edwin stopped and held up a finger, licking it and holding it into the air. They were downwind. He motioned for Henry to follow and pressed a finger to his lips again. Henry's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst. He had to make this seem legitimate. He had to see it through and then fake his emergency. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Edwin knew they were near the nest, as he had seen before that the doe would pace around the nest, and he figured that they were now feeling her steps' impact. So far, the jungle around them had been alive with insects, distant dinosaur cries, and wind rustling leaves. But suddenly, the forest fell silent and still. A strong stench of decay filled their nostrils. A new noise emerged, chittering, like baby birds squeaking and calling. Along with it came a rumbling, purring sound. "Fuck it, I'm doing it now," Henry thought. The shaking ground, the smell of death, the soft chittering, everything was overwhelming. Who cared what Edwin thought? When they got back, he'd just rush to his car and leave this nightmare behind. It was time to fake a medical emergency. He thought a panic attack seemed appropriate for their current state of affairs. He reached for his chest, preparing to clutch his heart and collapse. But then, ahead of him, Edwin pushed aside thick vines to reveal a large hole in the ground, scattered with broken eggshells. Large insects flew around decayed carcasses of long-dead dinosaurs. Then Henry saw them. 4 skinny, chicken-sized, featherless birds. It took him a moment, but then he realized they were the infant tyrannosaurs, each with a slight down of almost flesh-colored fuzz around their necks. The louder rumbling, purring noise made sense now, as Henry's eyes traveled upward to see the large, square head of one of the Rexes. He felt it was a proud mom, purring as she watched over her offspring. Henry almost urinated on the spot from fear and wonder. Edwin slowly turned, pulling a prism power cell from his pocket and holding it up. He pointed to Henry's pocket, and Henry's trembling hand mirrored the gesture. Something came to Edwin's mind, and he slowly turned his gaze back toward the nest, power cells still in hand. Only one Rex was at the nest. There should be 2. Edwin had been observing their behavior for some time, and they were always both present at the nest this time of day. Another thought struck him. The eggs had hatched. The doe Rex stayed with the babies, while the buck hunted. Behind Edwin, a sudden crash broke the silence, followed by a strange humming noise from Henry. Edwin turned back to see Henry standing stiff, eyes bugging so wide they might pop, and the strange noise was Henry's closed-mouth scream. Edwin followed Henry's gaze up and to the left. He then saw, peering through the foliage, the large square head of the buck Rex. It looked at them, blinked in confusion, sniffed, and made a guttural noise, like a large goose mixed with the eerie ghost sounds from The Grudge. It sent a chill down Edwin's spine. He glanced behind and saw the doe Rex standing at attention. Towering at 21 feet, she roared, and the buck roared in return. Edwin slammed his power cell into his belt and pressed the activation button to cloak himself. He grabbed Henry's power cell and slammed it into Henry's belt, activating it as Henry stood stiff, screaming silently, tears streaming down his cheeks. The tears, along with Henry himself, vanished from sight. Edwin, now invisible, reached out to where Henry had been standing and grabbed his forearm, pulling him back as he slowly retreated. The doe Rex stepped from the nest and moved through the thick vines where the men had just stood. She looked at the buck, who looked back. Both began scanning their surroundings with agitated grunts, lowering their massive heads to the ground where the intruders had been and sniffing vigorously. They alternated between sniffing, then standing at full height, stomping nervously, and then leaning down, sniffing again. The men remained downwind and hidden out of sight for now. Edwin had greatly miscalculated the behavior of the Rexes. He had not accounted for how things might shift once the babies hatched, and now he and his guest were in grave danger. Activating the return cube this close to the Rexes wasn't an option, not without risking disaster. Still, he was fairly certain he could navigate both himself and Henry back to the Jeep and eventually to the bird's nest. But first, there was something else he needed to take care of. This wasn't exactly how he intended things to unfold, but it was close. He might have gotten a little closer to the danger than he planned, but that was fine. Edwin was excellent at improvisation. He pulled Henry along with him, circling the buck Rex at a wide berth. Jesus! Oh, Jesus! Henry muttered under his breath repeatedly. Hush, you idiot, just keep walking, Edwin hissed through gritted teeth. His tone was chilling, colder, darker, coming from a completely different man than the one Henry had come to know in this short time. Henry flinched at the insult and the icy venom in Edwin's voice, and he was doing everything in his power not to evacuate his bladder and bowels right then and there. He was being pulled through the jungle of the goddamn Cretaceous period by the trillionaire he had robbed, all while being stalked by a pair of pissed-off tyrannosaurs. The fact that his pants remained clean was to him a personal testament to his grit in this moment. Then it hit him. Edwin was guiding him through the jungle, skirting around the second Rex and heading back toward the game trail, right out in the open. Sure, they were invisible, but it made no sense to leave the cover of the trees and brush. Henry had assumed Edwin was just trying to get far enough away to safely activate the return cube. But no, he was pulling him directly onto the exposed game trail. Henry began resisting, trying to halt their progress, but it was too late. With one final yank, Edwin pulled them both out onto the trail. About 100 yards ahead, the lower half of the buck Rex came into view, its tail swaying lazily back and forth, while its massive torso and head remained buried in the foliage, still searching. "What are you doing?" Henry hissed. "Let's get out of here. Activate the cube." "Wait for it," Edwin replied in a low, almost serene tone. "No, either activate that damn return cube, or let's get to the goddamn Jeep. And listen, I don't appreciate you calling me a..." Henry began to scold Edwin in a hushed but indignant whisper, habitually pointing in the direction of Edwin's voice. It took him a second to realize something terrifying. He could see his own finger as he pointed, and if he could see it, the Rex could too. "What the hell? Why is my belt not working?" he whispered, panicked, glancing back to make sure the Rex was still preoccupied. "Oh no," Edwin said sarcastically just beside him. "Looks like your power cell didn't have a full charge. What to do? What to do? That Rex is gonna stop searching any second now." "Wait, what? Give me your other power cell, hurry!" Henry pleaded. "Nah, can't do it, kiddo. Gotta have it to get back home. But hey, you've got a couple in that backpack of yours, the ones you stole. Use one of those," Edwin said, with hushed cockiness, revealing he had known all along. "What? No, I don't. No, I didn't. You're crazy. Give me the power cell," Henry stammered, surprised he'd been caught. In his surprise, he didn't realize he had raised his voice a bit too much. "Oh shit," he added in a more cautious whisper, as he turned away from the invisible psycho he'd been shouting at and spotted the buck Rex slowly backing out of the foliage. "Who do you work for?" Edwin growled, his voice a hateful, almost evil whisper. "I know you've got my tech in your pack. I know you're not Henry Wilkins. You with the government? A competitor? Is it Nexus? Those bastards have been trying to get their hands on my gateway tech for years. Answer me. And seriously, kid, if you don't pull out one of those power cells and come clean, you're going to be wrecked shit tomorrow." "You're nuts, man. Fuck!" Henry finally snapped and began fumbling with his backpack, but froze after slipping only one strap off his shoulder. Both men felt the ground begin to tremble, and there, ahead of them, stood both the buck and doe Rexes, side by side in their full monstrous glory. They were slowly advancing down the game trail, directly toward the men, only one of whom was currently visible. "God damn it, kid, you're gonna tell me who you really are after this. Here!" Edwin swore. Prism reached over and popped the dead power cell from Henry's belt, the planted one with just enough charge to keep things interesting. Edwin had made sure Henry got that specific cell. He had always planned to force the man to come clean. Originally, he intended for them to merely appear to be in danger when Henry became visible. He was going to take him near the nest and then lie, claim they were no longer downwind, and that Henry had better fess up before the Rexes caught their scent. But the newly hatched baby tyrannosaurs had derailed that plan entirely. By triggering their father's hunt response, the doe Rex metaphorically sending daddy out to get milk. Edwin's people had alerted him the day before that Henry Wilkins was a fake identity, complete with a fabricated background that wouldn't hold up under even moderate scrutiny. That had infuriated Edwin. Fake name and a backstory faker than a $3 bill. He had a major showcase coming up, a private gallery to debut his legendary killer collection. This trip to the Cretaceous was supposed to be a routine expedition, a quick $400 million for research funding. Instead, it had turned into a game of corporate espionage. Government, foreign agency, or rival firm, someone was trying to infiltrate his company. It wasn't the first time such attempts had been made, but it was the first time one had made it this far. Edwin had decided to play along and see where it led. The night before they traveled, he planted the weak power cell and returned. The next day, he brought the would-be spy to his bird's nest, showed off his time travel tech, and when the young man asked to use the restroom, Edwin knew that was the moment he'd make his move. Edwin had casually walked upstairs, but then darted to the control panel to lower the bird's nest to ground level. He raced back up to the stairwell landing, just in time to peek around the corner and nearly get caught. Henry was already at the shelf, checking to make sure the coast was clear. Edwin ducked back, waited a moment, then peeked again, this time catching Henry stuffing his backpack with the remaining tech. How the hell does he think I won't notice this after we get back from the field trip? Edwin had thought, but figured the youngster probably had some plan to initiate an early return to the present or something. It wouldn't matter, because Edwin's plan would work. He would have all the information he needed, and the asshole would be lucky that Edwin didn't get the information and then tase him with the small taser in his pants pocket, hog-tie him, and serve him up to the Deadeye King and his pack of merry raptors. But right now they were in real danger of becoming Dino Chow. There wasn't enough time to activate the return gate cube and make it through before the Rexes got too close, not to mention the possibility that the cube could malfunction or delay, which had happened before. He'd always been paranoid, which was why he never traveled with at least 2 cubes. But using one now would be a gamble, and there wasn't enough time to dig the backup from Dipshit's backpack. So Edwin threw the dead cell to the ground, retrieved the working power cell from his pocket, the one intended for the return cube, and jammed it into Henry's belt, activating the cloaking device. In an instant, Henry vanished from sight. The Tyrannosaurs paused, suddenly confused. Edwin grabbed Henry's arm and started pulling him towards the foliage, but stopped. The Rexes were moving again, their focus now locked on to the rustling grass being displaced by the 2 invisible men. God damn it, Edwin thought. Of course, I get 2 genius goddamn dinosaurs. What are you doing? Henry asked, his voice trembling. The fuckers can see the grass moving. They're too goddamn smart. They can track where we're going. They figured it out, Edwin said. Oh shit! What do we do, man? Henry asked. I ought to feed you to the damn things and save my own ass is what I should do, Edwin snapped. Shit, fine. My name is Joshua Marcel and I work for Nexus Technologies. Now get us out of this, man, Joshua said, finally coming clean. All right, Joshua, Edwin replied sardonically. Cover your ears." The Rexes were far too close for comfort. Just a few yards away, their guttural bellows were terrifying, eerily reminiscent, Edwin thought. He reached down and activated the high-pitched frequency emitter. The sound was shrill and intense, painful to human ears, but it was specifically tuned to affect animals with highly sensitive hearing. The Rexes froze mid-stride, lowering their massive heads. Their tiny forearms reached up toward the sides of their skulls as they grimaced in distress. Slowly they began to turn and walk away. "Oh, thank Christ!" Joshua yelled through the noise. "Ha! Christ had nothing to do with it. Thank me!" Edwin shouted back with a chuckle. "All right. Hold on to my arm. Let's get back to the Jeep. I'll park it back at the bird's nest before we return home. We'll deal with everything else when we're safe." Henry reached for Edwin's arm, but with both of them invisible, he had to feel around blindly. His hand accidentally latched onto Edwin's chest. "That's my tit, son. Try again," Edwin said loudly. Henry slid his hand up and firmly gripped Edwin's bicep. It was surprisingly firm and muscular for a man in his mid-50s. He held on tightly as they began to back away, keeping their eyes locked on the slowly retreating Rexes. "Man, I can't believe that Henry began, but his sentence was cut off by a roar unlike anything either man had ever heard. It felt like the air itself had detonated. The ground trembled violently, far more than it had from the Rexes. It was something enormous. It was something enormous running. It was something enormous running toward them. They stood frozen as the Rexes reacted in sheer panic. The predators turned sharply to the right, away from their nest, then back to the left, considering defending their nest. But the roar echoed again and the Rexes fled into the foliage, abandoning the side of the trail where their nest lay. They were running from something so terrifying that they were leaving their freshly hatched offspring behind. Edwin had just enough time to think about activating the return gateway cube, but it was already too late. Another roar split the air, deafening and soul-shaking. Then the foliage near the nest erupted, and out stepped a true monster. It resembled a T-Rex in some ways, the feet, the legs, the long tail, the squarish head, but its body was grotesquely massive. Its arms weren't stubby two-clawed limbs, no. These were long, powerful arms, ending in massive hands with 4 blade-like claws. The skin was white with red, tiger-like stripes running down its back. Above its eyes were 2 small horn-like appendages, and from the back of its head down to just above its tail, thick black spikes jutted out menacingly. The tail itself ended in 3 spike-like projections, almost like a stegosaurus. But the size, that was the most staggering part. Edwin guessed it stood between 40 and 45 feet tall, and spanned close to at least 60 to 70 feet long from snout to tail, twice the size of the tyrannosaurs that had just fled. It stood now in the game trail, staring after the retreating Rexes, and its massive yellowed teeth were shreds of flesh, and dangling from one side of its mouth was the limp body of a Rex infant. Slowly the behemoth turned its head toward the trail where Edwin and Joshua stood, still invisible. Edwin had forgotten in the chaos that the high-pitched frequency was still blaring. The terror and adrenaline had drowned it out. Worse yet, the frequency wasn't bothering this monster, but it sure seemed to be aggravating it. The beast stared down the trail and roared. and even from 100 yards away, they could feel the hot gust of its breath blast past them. The sound was deafening. Edwin quickly reached down and turned off the emitter. Joshua's grip on his arm tightened. "Oh, Jesus, man! He ate the babies! That's... Joshua stammered. "That's one big fucking Rex," Edwin whispered. "Ha! A BF Rex," he thought. Even in this moment of horror, Edwin's mind remained sharp. Out of all the possible dinosaurs with no fossil record, I never dreamed I'd see a predator this perfect, he thought to himself. He made a decision right then. When he returned to his own time, he would prepare an expedition to come back and capture this magnificent beast. He had discovered a species no paleontologist had ever unearthed. It would be his prize, his discovery, another part of his impressive legacy. But first, he had to survive. "I need to have this thing," Edwin said under his breath. What? No, we need to go!" Joshua whispered urgently. "We can't risk the gateway failing or taking too long. Once I activate it, it won't be tethered to me, so it won't be invisible. We wait it out. It can't see us," Edwin replied in a hushed voice. Joshua had to strain to hear him. The BF Rex had stopped scanning when the noise ended, but it still peered in their direction. Not directly, yet. "What's it doing?" Joshua whispered. "I don't know," Edwin began, but then he stopped. The creature's eyes blinked rapidly. Then a thin, translucent secondary eyelid slid across both eyes from the far side inward. And then it looked straight at them. "Interesting," Edwin murmured, mesmerized. "Does it have infrared?" he wondered. Before he could think further, the BF Rex let out a horrific guttural roar, a soul-shaking sound, and began to charge. "He sees us!" Edwin yelled. Joshua's body betrayed him. His bladder and bowels let go as the creature thundered toward them, its footsteps shaking the ground. He gripped Edwin's arm with white-knuckled panic, nails digging into his skin. Edwin thought fast. He followed Joshua's arm down to his belt, yanked out the power cell from his invisibility system, and gripped it tightly. Joshua immediately became visible. Didn't matter. The beast had already seen them. It had some sort of natural way of seeing through their light-bending invisibility. Edwin assumed, perhaps, it was indeed their heat it was seeing somehow. Edwin switched off his own cloaking system. No point now. He appeared beside Joshua in the trail. The monster roared again. "What did you do?" Joshua screamed, letting go. "Sorry, not sorry, kid. Also, you shat yourself," Edwin said, reaching to his hip and pulling out a small high-voltage taser. In one fluid motion, he jabbed it into Joshua's side and hit the button. Joshua crumpled to his knees. Edwin didn't need to outrun the BF Rex. He just needed to outrun Joshua. He turned to sprint as the shadow of the beast fell over them. "You killed me, you motherfucker!" Joshua said, his voice trembling, shaken, broken. On his knees, he reached back with a sudden burst of desperation and clamped onto Edwin's ankle, just as Edwin was beginning to sprint away. Edwin was yanked off balance and slammed flat onto the ground, face first. A second later, a massive clawed shadow engulfed them both as the BF Rex's colossal hand descended and wrapped its gnarled fingers around Joshua Marcel's small, writhing body. Joshua screamed, raw, panicked, primal. Edwin felt himself being dragged backward, boots digging helplessly into the soil as Joshua refused to release him. Then lifted. The earth dropped away. His stomach lurched as he rose through the air. He saw his safari hat fall to the ground. It seemed to take forever to land. Above him, the stench hit like a gut punch. Hot, steaming gust of vile, stinking breath, thick with rot, blood, bile mixed with Joshua's piss and shit. The air was humid with death. Edwin's stomach churned violently. He gagged. Joshua had lost control of his bowels again. It added even more to the heavy stench of the monster looming just above. He spotted Joshua's backpack, a red leather thing once tough and sleek, slipped from the man's shoulder. It tumbled through the air and smacked the ground, bouncing to the side of the dinosaur's thunderous, cratered foot. Well, that's one delivery Nexus Technologies isn't going to receive, Edwin thought grimly. But he, Edwin Prism, Edwin Percy Pringle III, he would make it back. This was not where his story ended, goddammit. Survival ignited in him like a fuse. He wasn't dying here, not like this. He twisted and kicked back with brutal precision. His boot slammed into Joshua's face with a satisfying crunch of cartilage. Another quick snap of the leg, and this time Joshua's grunt was wet with blood. The grip loosened. Edwin dropped. He fell far and hit hard, rolled and ran like hell for the nearest patch of foliage, unclipping the return gate cube from his belt loop. Even in all this chaos, the power cell never left his hand. He crashed into the underbrush, found a small clearing, dropped the cube onto the dirt, and rammed the power cell into the top slot. The cube hissed, clicked, and began to unfold, mechanical arms spinning as energy built up in a glowing pulse. Behind him, in the game trail, Joshua was still screaming. Blood gushed from Joshua's nose. He watched Edwin fall, roll on the ground, and run for the trees. His broken nose throbbed. That bastard Prism had kicked him twice in the face. The motherfucker was going to get away, and Joshua was not. Was it karma? Fate? Shit luck? Joshua's thoughts were stopped as he heard loud growling and felt hot, damp wind. He looked up. His body clenched tight in the BF Rex's crushing grip. He had thought the Buck and Doe Rexes were the peak of terror, apex predators, unstoppable. But this beast made them look like museum puppets. It wasn't a dinosaur. It was a thing. It was a monster dragged out of nightmares and painted in flesh and bone. Its face loomed in front of Joshua now. Massive jaws half open, rows of teeth, yellowed and cracked, framed its enormous mouth. Its breath roared past Joshua in waves so strong they flapped his torn clothes. He sobbed, pissed again, legs trembling uncontrollably. The creature turned him side to side, studying him, curious about this new small squirming thing he had caught. It moved slowly, methodically. Joshua beat his fist against the fingers the size of tree trunks, useless. He looked like a rag doll in its grasp. And then it turned him upside down. He screamed louder, flailing, trying to twist back and see what was happening, but he couldn't. He shrieked Edwin's name, then screamed for his mother. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew he sounded like a child, but there was no pride left, just terror. Then he felt it, hot, rough, wet. A tongue, massive, barbed, the texture like sandpaper made of knives, dragged itself across the skin of his bare calf. It was licking him. "Let me go, you son of a bitch! Put me down! God, help me, Mom! Help me, Mom!" His voice cracked, his mind shattered. There was no bravery left, no resistance. Every time his thoughts crept toward death, he screamed nonsense to push them away. He was 25. 20-fucking-5. He had plans, a future, a whole life ahead of him, things he wanted to do. Crunch! The sound was wet, ragged, wrong. Joshua howled in animal agony as the jaws clamped down into the backs of his knees, driving a galaxy of white-hot pain straight into his skull. Nerves erupted, blood sprayed from the wounds like fountains, and then a savage jerk, a rip. He shrieked as his legs were torn away, bone shattered, sinew snapped, flesh flayed. His body convulsed violently, and the world began to blur. He felt nothing below the knees, nothing at all, only raw, howling agony. Then blackness creeping in, thick and welcoming. But the monster wasn't done. The hand hoisted him again. The world tilted. His blood left hot trails down his back as the dinosaur opened its mouth wider, wider than seemed possible, and released him. Now he lay limp, weak, nearly unconscious, on something warm and sticky. It pulsed. He realized it was the creature's tongue. A gentle, sick breeze blew across his face. Everything felt heavy, soft. Sleep beckoned. He laid his neck down. It landed perfectly between two jagged yellow teeth. Above him, more teeth. He barely registered the shadows closing in. And then crunch. A stabbing pain in his throat. A spray of red. And then nothing. Edwin had watched the whole thing unfold, his face lit by a sick, fascinated grin. He'd heard Joshua's screams, heard him cry out Edwin's name and his mother's. "Sorry, kid, your mom and me are a little busy at the moment," Edwin muttered, glancing at the gateway cube. It was nearly ready. The air shimmered as the portal began to solidify inside the doorway. He looked back. He heard Joshua scream again, this time for God to help him as well as his mother. "Yeah, Joshy boy, you didn't specify which God, so I think you're out of luck there, too." This time he yelled arrogant taunts towards the soon-to-be very dead Joshua. The BF Rex had turned Joshua upside down, was now licking his legs like an appetizer. Edwin chuckled. "Does he taste good? Why don't you take a bite? You know you want to," he said with anticipation. The BF Rex licked Joshua again and seemingly decided he did in fact taste good. It bit down with brutal power, shearing Joshua's legs away with a jerk and shake that sent a spray of gore across the jungle. Edwin raised his eyebrows. He was hoping for more screaming, but at least he got to see it happen up close. And then the creature tossed the ruined twitching husk into its mouth. Crunch! The sound was so deep, so final, it echoed inside Edwin's chest. Beep! The cube behind him emitted a rising tone. The portal was active. He stood, eyes still on the beast. "So long, my dear BF Rex," he said, voice low and cool. "We shall meet again, and when we do, you're coming home with Daddy." Though he would have to get his team working on a much bigger gateway. Hell, maybe he should just start working on getting blood samples from as many dinosaur species as possible, and be the first person to crack the code on cloning dinosaurs. Scientists had been trying for decades, but even in 2045 they just didn't have enough DNA. Well, Edwin could get all the fresh DNA he could ever need for cloning. Sure, he could just bring the actual dinosaurs themselves over and open up his own version of a dino zoo, but he didn't want to mess with history too much. Hell, he was afraid what was happening now might bring about a Sound of Thunder type situation, but it was too late to do anything about that now. Bringing over a raptor hadn't affected the timeline at all, it seemed, but he didn't want to roll the dice by bringing over a bunch of dinosaurs. But man, this BF Rex was a beautiful creature to behold. Ferocious, terrifying, monstrous. He would find a way to bring it over at the very least. If it affected the timeline, he would settle for cloning it. But to have the real thing would be amazing. It was his discovery, and it was the ultimate predator. He was determined to have it. He spoke out loud again. "That's right, you big fucking beast. I will have you whether you like it or not." He didn't expect it to hear him, but the BF Rex did. It snapped its head toward the foliage, locking eyes with Edwin, eyes that held primal rage in its rawest form. It roared, the sound splitting the sky, and began moving toward the trees with thunderous, shaking steps. Edwin did not stick around. He dove through the glowing portal. A second later, he stumbled onto the clean metal floor of his lab at Crystal Lake, back in the year 2045. The portal shimmered behind him, still open, casting pale blue light across the walls. He exhaled, chest heaving. "There's no place like home," he said, watching the Prism Time Gateway begin its shutdown sequence with a final hiss. But it didn't shut down completely. Not yet. The return gateway took around 15 seconds to self-destruct back in the Cretaceous. The room filled with a sudden blast of heat and a sound like tearing metal. Edwin's eyes widened. The air behind him warped violently and something enormous surged through. A bone-white reptilian arm exploded out of the portal with terrifying speed, its 4 claws snapping closed inches from his back. Edwin dove forward, rolling down the ramp, instinct screaming, just as the claws clamped down with enough force to dent the titanium floor. They slammed shut where his spine had been a heartbeat earlier. He hit hard and rolled, landing in a heap behind a lab bench. Sparks rained down, equipment tumbled, monitors burst. The arm thrashed, long as a truck, pale scales stretched tight over bulging muscle, slick with gore. The claws carved deep gouges in the steel as they scraped and searched, trying to get a grip. The BF Rex had followed him. It couldn't fit through the gateway, not all of it, but it didn't need to. It just needed to grab him. A guttural roar thundered through the portal, shaking the entire lab. The lights flickered, ceiling panels rattled. Edwin pressed a hand to his ear as the sound crashed through him like a living wave. The sound from millions of years ago almost bursting his eardrums in the present. He turned just in time to see the monstrous face beyond the gateway, large, yellowed, bloody teeth gnashing, teeth that still held torn flesh from infant tyrannosaurs and one felled would-be corporate pirate. He saw one large dark eye of the BF Rex looking through the portal. It stared at him in something that wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite hunger. It was personal. He had evaded the ultimate apex predator. The claws flexed again, but it was too late. The light from the portal flickered, pulsed, then began to fade. The arm, still grasping desperately, started to dematerialize. First the hand, then the wrist, vanishing in strips of static and light like burning film. The roar echoed one final time, rattling the tools on the shelves before dying out into silence. The gateway collapsed with a snap. Gone. Only claw marks and scorched metal remained. Edwin stayed on the floor, gasping, every nerve still buzzing. And then he started to laugh, low and broken, unhinged, triumphant, kind of excited, yet shaken, but alive. "There's no place like fucking home." A little later that night, Edwin had calmed. He ate dinner and spent a couple hours daydreaming of the BF Rex devouring Joshua. It was beautiful. He so wished he could travel to the same day twice, so he could go back and watch it over and over. He decided he would start wearing a camera on him on every trip to the past, just in case there was ever something he would want to re-experience. Tomorrow night would be his big showcase, and regardless of the day's excitement, he had to complete his collection. Sure, he could just send someone else to fetch it for him, but that was no fun. Edwin was back at the controls of his gateway. This time, though, he was punching in a time in the past not so distant, and after a few moments the gateway buzzed to life again, and he was looking through it at Camp Crystal Lake, 1980. He was dressed in all black, and wore a black ski mask as well. He needed to blend in with the dark, let things play out, and then collect his prize. Edwin stepped through the portal and into the past once more. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 1 of Primal, a Friday the 13th story, my latest book. I hope you enjoyed this surprise chapter. I was going to wait a while to drop it, but I decided, you all got the prologue and it seems to be being enjoyed, so I thought you might like the first chapter a little sooner than expected. So here it is. The next narration I'll put out will be another chapter of Murder Report, and after that, a chapter of Freddy's Dead, and then we'll return back to Primal with Chapter 2. I know some of you might have been hoping for some Jason action or slasher action with Chapter 1, but I was using the prologue in Chapter 1 to really set up Edwin's character for this story, because he is definitely the human antagonist of the story. The prologue might have made him come off a little sociopathic, a little selfish, self-absorbed, but I hope after Chapter 1 you can see that it's more than that. He is a villain. Plain and simple. I had a lot of fun writing this chapter, with the whole swerve that he knew that Henry was actually Joshua. He didn't know Henry was Joshua Marcel. He just knew Henry wasn't Henry, and he was up to something. And, he had decided ahead of time he was going to give him a faulty power cell to scare him into admitting who he worked for, in exchange for, getting an active power cell from Edwin. And getting to witness the guy stealing everything, that was even better. Because he's like, it's in your back. Why don't you use one of the power cells in that backpack, the ones you stole from me? That was a lot of fun. Setting up the stuff they watched, him getting to see the Deadeye King Raptor hunting with his pack, killing a baby Triceratops. I know that's brutal, but I needed to get across this pack is going to be something to fear. It's not going to be just some background thing. It's going to play a part in the story going forward. The Rexes, on the other hand, they were so terrified by this beast, this big fucking Rex, named by Edwin, that they left their own fresh hatchlings behind to be killed. They thought about it. They tried to stay. I hope I built up enough tension and suspense in those scenes. At the nest, when Edwin realized the buck wasn't there like he expected, and then it came up behind them, and whenever they were in the clearing of the game trail, and he realized, they're invisible, but now the Rexes were noticing the grass moving around their feet, so they were kind of fucked. In a way, the BF Rex saved them from the Rexes. And yes, the BF Rex did not exist. Anybody wondering why I created a dinosaur? It's because, like I said in the story, 75% of species from the Cretaceous, Jurassic, all that, have never been found. Like, they know they existed, but we've never found fossil records of them. So, there's a lot of dinosaurs you can just create and say that they came from that time period because we haven't found their fossils in the present. And that's what I was doing with this dinosaur. I needed something ferocious, monstrous, something bigger than the T-Rex from Jurassic World and Park, and bigger than the Indominus Rex, bigger than the Giganotosaurus. You know, I wanted something that was more than a dinosaur, more than a mutant, more than a hybrid or whatever the movies are doing. I wanted something that was all dinosaur and all monster. And this thing is terrifying. It is what nightmares are made of when it comes to dinosaur horror, I promise you. There were a few little images you saw on the screen if you were watching through the narration that I had done with AI, just to kind of give you an idea of its look and size. And yes, I did give it white reptilian skin with red tiger striping to represent like the white and red of Jason Voorhees' hockey mask. I hope you enjoyed Josh getting what was coming to him, and the little surprise once Edwin escaped and got through the portal. You know, the BF Rex was like, you're coming back, boy, but he didn't get him. You kind of got to see what would happen if something was like halfway through from the past. As the portal shut down, it would just dematerialize and go back. You know, it would just be in the past still. So the BF Rex is still waiting for them there. And without spoiling anything, who knows? Maybe that backpack that Joshua dropped while being picked up by the BF Rex didn't get squished or anything. Maybe it's still laying there in the Cretaceous, and maybe it might play a part in the story later on. We'll have to wait and see, yeah? This I can promise you, if you were a little disappointed that you didn't get any slasher action in this chapter, other than the little nod to Crystal Lake 1980, which I'm sure a lot of you have figured out what he's collecting there, to show off at his showcase the next day, I can promise you that Chapter 2 is going to have so much horror and slasher action going on, and Chapter 2 is going to be the catalyst to get our characters, a lot of which you're about to meet in Chapter 2, all the characters and Jason into the Cretaceous, where the rest of the story is going to play out. Chapter 2 is going to be huge. It's going to be chock full of slasher and horror fun, Easter eggs. Chaos is going to break out. It's going to be so exciting, I promise you. Thanks for hanging with me so far today with Chapter 1. I hope you listened to the prologue first, and I hope you're enjoying the book so far. If you are enjoying it, please drop a comment and just let me know what you think. You know, some feedback. If you're enjoying it, if you like the kill, if you like the suspense and the tension and everything like that, and what you thought of the BF Rex, you know, and what you think might happen later in the story, you know, maybe with the Raptor Pack, the Rexes, even the herbivores or the plesiosaur that's in the lake, and Jason Voorhees himself, you know. Is an electric fence going to keep him out of the bird's nest structure that was built in the Cretaceous? Will our survivors be able to hide out there? And you'll see. I don't want to give too much away. Chapter 2 is going to be big. You'll meet the characters. We'll get there to the past with them, and we'll talk then. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. Click the like button. Click the bell so you always know when new chapters like this one are dropping. And if you want to really see the channel keep going and growing for years to come, please consider... My dog's barking, sorry. Please consider... he's got me all messed up. Please consider joining the Patreon or becoming a channel member. You can even order a $7 Cameo. We are on Cameo at the moment. You can also do one-time donations through super comments, super chats in the comments below. Click the little money sign thing when you comment. You can also make one-time donations through Cash App and or PayPal. All the information is in the description and pinned comment below. It would really help the channel if you wanted to support it in one of those ways. It would go a long ways. But honestly, the best way to support the channel is to click to be sure you're subscribed, click the like button on the videos, drop comments, and tell your friends about the channel. They might enjoy it as well. And you can also find my other two books, Quarantine, a Friday the 13th story, and Celestial Slumber, a Nightmare on Elm Street novel. Both of those are on Amazon right now in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. All that information has been on the screen. It'll be in the description and pinned comment as well. Thank you all so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me to have you here. To all the dads out there, happy Father's Day. I hope this was a nice surprise and you enjoyed it. Be excellent to each other. And no matter how crazy it gets, try to stay sane inside insanity.
The kid is supposed to save us. We thought we escaped the killers, but one of them escaped with us, and now there's no future left. We fell through time to ancient ground where giants walked where streets so sound. The sky is red, the leaves drip black, and something's always watching back. Not claws, not teeth, not jaws, or scale, but something colder on our trail. A mask, a breath, no words, no cry, just chasing, walking, and you die. Primal, no gun, no rules, just death and dirt. Primal, the jungle breathes and makes it hurt. No scream can reach the stars, we knew he's behind you now, and coming through. Primal, still in silence, red with rust. Primal, he's not alive, but he still hunts. The rest can roar, the raptors scream, but chasing tears through every dream. He doesn't run, he doesn't bleed. You hear the crunch, you watch him feed. We hide in trees and caves and nights, but still he walks, no need for sight. He waits while thunder splits the sky and strikes when stars are blinking dry.
Doesn't belong in this time, but this time belongs to him now. Not even the dinosaurs challenge him, because even they know what death is.
I stare in ancient rain. He doesn't stop, he doesn't change. Claws behind, mask ahead. Between the beasts and him, you're dead. A scream is lost in jungle cries. A friend impaled before your eyes. The BF Rex flees in the dark. Jason stayed to leave his mark. Primal, the blood drips hot on Cretaceous stone. Primal, the jungle breathes and makes it hurt. No scream can reach the stars, we knew he's behind you now, and coming through. Primal, still in silence, red with rust. Primal, he's not alive, but he still hunts. The rest can roar, the raptors scream, but Jason tears through every dream. He doesn't run, he doesn't bleed, you doesn't hurt. The Rex can roar, the raptors scream, but Cretaceous stone. But Jason tears through ever speaks, but he always finds you. Primal. This time below. Dead eyes stare in ancient